At 29 years old, I never imagined myself in this state. Alex is my name, and I have been living with my folks in the city for last year. The twist is that I'm not some suffering millennial who went back home unable to pay rent. No, I bought the house here. I pay the entire mortgage, cover all the groceries, bills, everything. From my parents, they pay nothing at all. Let me provide some background. Mike, 57, and Sarah, 54. My parents are retired teachers. Years of living in the countryside, they decided they wanted a change of scene when they quit working. Claiming to be tired with the calm existence, they yearned to be nearer the thrills of the metropolis. At least that's what they stated. I considered, why not? As a software engineer, I was working well, making decent money, and the city had better employment prospects nevertheless. Since they had done so much for me growing up, I also believed I would be of assistance to them. You know, typical family life. We moved into a lovely 3-bedroom house in the city. Though it's not a mansion or anything, 3 bedrooms, a little backyard, and a living room large enough for everyone to hang out comfortably really are improvements. As the one paying the bills, I made sure to claim the master bedroom. Its own bathroom and walk-in closet are a godsend, as everyone else would have to share a bathroom. Since I work from home around 80% of the time, I turned the second bedroom into my home office. I arranged it exactly how I wanted: 2 monitors, a cozy chair, the whole thing. When family visited, the third bedroom evolved into a guest room. Right? Simple enough? Everything first seemed to be in good shape. We all got into a quite nice schedule. My folks were simply delighted to be in the city. I performed my job, paid the bills, and cleaned the house while they did their thing, gardening, TV watching, whatever retirees do. Paying for everything was not a problem. I make 6 figures, and other than their pensions, I find their income to be really meagre. Besides, family matters. Not that you charge families rent, right? The turning point then arrived, and let me say, all of it happened faster than I could have ever dreamed. One day, my mother made a casual remark at breakfast, as though it were no great issue. At first, I didn't give it much thought. "You know," she added, "your sister Lisa and her husband Tom are thinking about moving to the city. Lisa's pregnant, so they could really use the help. They're not doing so well back in their old town." Tom, 32, and Lisa, 31, had always been the kind of pair who fluttered from one unhappy circumstance to another. Though they were not precisely struggling, they were not flourishing either. Lisa's pregnancy added yet another level of complexity to the mix. Though my mother had different ideas, I thought, okay, maybe they would migrate to the city and have a tiny apartment or something. Now this is the part I should have seen coming, but I didn't. She sat me down a few days later and said, "We've invited Lisa and Tom to come stay with us. It'll just be for a little bit until they get back on their feet." Her tone was incredibly innocent. I sort of nodded along, figuring, okay, whatever, they'll stay for a time and then get their own home. My parents didn't exactly ask whether I was cool with them moving in. They just told me after they'd already welcomed me. I didn't know, though, that this was only the start of the anarchy. Here's the deal. They come in, and immediately away it's evident they believe they are staying permanently. I was still absorbing the entire thing when Lisa and Tom showed up at our house a week later with luggage in hand. Since I am the one paying for everything, food, electricity, mortgage, you name it, and now I have 2 additional people to feed and take care of, I am already feeling the tension build up. Not one person even inquired as to whether I approved of it. Don't get me wrong, I love my sister. They just moved in like it seemed most normal in the world. Her family comes first, after all. Lisa's not precisely the most conscientious person on the planet, though. She is the kind of person who always finds herself in messy circumstances and therefore depends on other people to save her. Additionally, Tom? He's decent enough, but his entitled attitude bothers me in the wrong way. Like Lisa's spouse, he naturally demands particular consideration from everybody around him. But here's where things start to go badly wrong. Lisa begins leaving these little remarks a few days after they moved in. You know, the kind of thing that seems innocuous but is really somewhat bothersome? "This place is so big, it must be hard for you to clean it all by yourself," she would say. Or, "I can't wait until the baby's here. We're going to need a lot of space for all the baby stuff." I didn't give it much thought at first, but then came the bombshell. Lisa and Tom drew me aside one evening after I had just ended a demanding day of work to say they wanted to chat. All right, maybe they're going to admit they took up space and ate all the food without trying to help. No, though. Rather, Lisa, all laid back, says, "So we've been thinking it would make more sense for us to take the master bedroom." I just looked at her. What I was hearing amazed me. "We need more space," Tom said, as clearly was evident. "Now keep in mind, I pay for the whole mortgage. The baby's going to need a lot of stuff, and your room has the walk-in closet and the private bathroom. My name is listed on the house. I pay for all the food as well, so I have been helping the entire family without expecting anything in return." And here they were, begging me to abandon my own bedroom. I got stunned. Not even right away could I react. Lisa wasn't having it when I finally asked, "Why don't you just take the spare room? It's plenty big, and it's already set up for guests." It felt like the arrogance suddenly hit me all at once. "But that room doesn't have a walk-in closet, and the baby's going to need space," she said. I looked at them for a few seconds, trying to keep cool. I answered, keeping my voice as steady as I could, "I'm not giving up my room." Tom looked a bit surprised that I wasn't merely caving in. "But Lisa, you could have the spare room, or you could find somewhere else to stay." She looked really offended, and that's when I understood this wasn't going to end well. After that uncomfortable talk, where Lisa and Tom straight up asked me to give up my room, I thought maybe, just maybe, they would realize how stupid they sounded and back off. Who in their right sense asks the person making the food, house payment and light maintenance to simply abandon their space like that? Of course, though, that is not exactly what transpired. Over the next few days, I began to see these little things. Lisa and Tom were, first of all, shockingly at ease. Too at ease. I wasn't saying anything yet, but it was building inside me. They would have their stuff all over the living room, had their shoes kicked off next to the couch, and Lisa was already talking about where she was going to put all the baby gear, like the house was theirs or something, that sense of something about to fall. One day I had to spend several hours in the workplace, though occasionally I have meetings I cannot miss. Normally I work from home. Still, I go home about lunchtime to pick something to eat and find something odd as soon as I step in. My own items, my stuff, are in the hall. Knowing what this means, my heart is already racing, yet I had to see it for myself. My clothes are piled on the floor and my computer monitor is simply sitting there unplugged, like someone was in the process of transferring it. Sure enough, Lisa was standing in the centre of my room, packing the remainder of my belongings as I walked to it. She hardly seems shocked when I enter either. I couldn't believe her merely glancing over at me. "Oh, hey, I was just finishing up." I yelled out, maybe louder than I intended. "What the hell are you doing?" She had the guts to act all calm and collected like this was no great issue, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Your mum said we could start moving our stuff in here. The baby's coming soon and we need the space," she continued. I could feel my blood heating. Mothers, not paying a single cent toward the mortgage, my mother felt it was okay to let Lisa and Tom use my room without even consulting me. I was not about to let this slide pass. I answered no, entering the room. "You're not moving into my room. I already told you guys to take the guest room." Lisa objected. She crossed her arms and cast me this look as though I was the one acting irrationally. I wasn't having it. "The guest room is too small for the baby, and there is no closet. We need extra space. I'm the one paying the mortgage. I'm the one who has been paying for everything in this house. You and Tom aren't even contributing anything. If you need more space, you're welcome to find your own place." At this point, I was really furious, and could tell Lisa was becoming agitated too. She did not, however, back off. She said, "Your mum said it was fine," repeating as if that were the last word. Now here I lost it. Marching back out of the room, I grabbed my phone and phoned my mother, who, by the way, wasn't even home at the moment. I didn't even let her say hi. "Second," she responded. There was a long silence on the other end, like she didn't know what to say. "Mom, did you tell Lisa and Tom they could move into my room?" I couldn't believe what she said at last. "Well, I thought it would be the best solution. They need the space, and you already have the office. It's not like you're using the room for much." I snipped. "Are you serious right now?" My mother tried to cool me down. saying it wasn't a big thing and that we're all family, but I was done listening. I pay the mortgage, I pay for all the groceries, I pay the bills, and you think it's okay for Lisa and Tom to just take over my room? By now, Lisa must have heard me, since she came storming out of the door looking angry. I'm not giving them my room. If they don't move their stuff, they're going to need to find another place to stay. Tom entered right then. You're seriously going to throw us out with a baby on the way? He arrived looking somewhat agitated, so he must have heard the noise from outside. What's going on? He asked, so I set it out for him. What's going on is your wife thinks she can just take over my room without even asking. And I'm telling you both right now, it's not happening. You can either stay in the guest room or you can leave. Tom wasn't happy about that. Declaring how family is, and how I should be ready to give up things for them, he became defensive. But right then, I was beyond reason. Sacrifices? I'm already paying for this entire house. What are you guys contributing, huh? Nothing. And now you think you could just walk in and take over? The yelling got pretty loud at that point, and I think it was clear neither side was backing down. I turned away my mother's attempts to summon me back, too annoyed to deal with her apologies. Tom carried on and on about how I wasn't being fair, how they had a baby on the way, and how families should stick together in trying circumstances. Lisa stormed off, slamming the door behind her, and Tom just stood there gazing at me like I was the bad guy. I had had enough. I turned to both of them and said, "You've got until the end of the day to move your stuff out of my room. If you don't, I'll move it out for you." Still, I was not bothered. For the rest of the day, I stayed in my office trying to cool off. I wasn't about to let them stroll all over me in my own house, especially when I was the one paying for everything. I knew if I returned out there, it would simply become another dispute. I wanted not to deal with any of them. Deep down, though, I understood this was the starting point. They wouldn't be laying down, and I sensed my mother would become involved once more. I wasn't about to give up either, though. Not this time. After that blow-up with Lisa and Tom, I reasoned perhaps, just maybe, they would at last back off. I mean, I was rather clear. My room wasn't for sale, and they either stayed in the guest room or located somewhere else to live. Seemed to be really straightforward for me. Naturally, though, things did not go as planned. I stayed largely to myself the following day. I was not seeking more drama. To be honest, I was still boiling over how things had gone. Working in the office most of my time, I tried to act as though everything was normal, but I could sense the strain in the air by the time supper came around. I didn't mind the silence. It seemed as though everyone was dodging each other and tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. I could live with Lisa and Tom staying in the guest room if they were at last going to remain without generating more problems. But then something happened that drove me over the line. That evening I entered the kitchen to get some dinner. As usual, I had purchased all the goods, but when I opened the refrigerator, it was essentially empty. I'm talking about food I recently purchased 2 days ago. Gone. Same scenario, I checked the freezer. Obviously, I knew my parents did not eat like that, and neither did I. Who then else might it be? Lisa and Tom. I was already annoyed, but I tried to ignore it. Anyway, I'll just pick up more tomorrow. They would have most likely helped themselves to everything without even asking. Still, it was more than simply food. My mom entered the kitchen, not looking me in the eye when I went to settle down at the table to eat. She created silently plates for Tom, Lisa, my dad, and herself. Then, she didn't create one for me. First I assumed she may have forgotten, thus I basically waited. She sat down nevertheless, having finished feeding everyone. Not lying, I felt the wrath rising once more as I stood there like a moron watching them all start eating. They seemed to be penalizing me all for advocating for myself. Trying to cool myself, I turned to face my mother. "You didn't make me a plate?" She hardly turned to look. She continued as nonchalantly as if she were remarking on the temperature. "You don't want to help the family. You don't eat with the family." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She not even answered. "Excuse me? I pay for everything here. The groceries, the mortgage, and now I'm being iced out." I became even more annoyed when my dad simply sighed and continued to eat as though nothing was occurring. Sitting there, Lisa and Tom had a haughty attitude, as though they had won some sort of power play. When I passed Lisa, she even had the guts to smile at me. I could take it no more. I wasn't about to be treated in the house I paid for like some foreigner. My mind racing, I slammed the refrigerator door closed and bolted from the kitchen. Knowing what I had to do next, I headed straight to my room and picked up my laptop and began searching for eviction announcements. I reasoned that they could find another place to reside if they wanted to treat me disrespectfully. After all, enough is enough. I'm not a free hotel service. Within an hour I had the paperwork ready. I copied 2 copies, one for my parents and one for Lisa and Tom. Though at this point they had crossed the line, it felt strange to be separating my own family. For weeks they had been disrespecting me, behaving as though the house belonged to them, and then freezing me off since I would not comply to their ludicrous requests. Once the notifications were printed, I headed out to the living room, where everyone was seated and acting as though nothing was wrong. I was not going to put up with it anymore. I spoke no words at all. Tom's face became white. "If you're not out by tomorrow, I'm calling the police." He had not at all expected this. "You can't be serious," I said. "I am serious." Tom stood up, looking at me, but I didn't move. "I'm done with this. You've been freeloading here without contributing a thing. Now you think you can take over my house? No, not anymore. We're family, and I was taller than him, bigger than him, and I wasn't going to be scared by his little temper tantrum. We're family," he muttered through clenched teeth. "You can't just throw us out." "Yes," I responded, approaching closely. "I'm the one who pays for this house, not you, not Lisa, and not Mom and Dad. If you don't want to be respectful, you don't get to stay here." Lisa naturally started crying as if that would alter anything. "I'm pregnant and you're kicking us out. What kind of brother are you?" I shot back. "I'm the brother who has been paying for everything while you two take advantage of me." Tom looked like he wanted to fight more, but I could see the awareness beginning to seep in. "You have 24 hours. That's more than generous." My mother, who had been silently seated there all day, suddenly spoke up. I wasn't bluffing, but I didn't care anymore. "You can't do this, honey. They're your sister and brother-in-law. This is family." Pointing to the eviction notice she held, I said, "I've already done it. You have 30 days to find somewhere else too. If you are not gone by then, I will be acting legally." The room went dead quiet after that. Not saying a word, my dad sat there staring at the table as though he knew nothing else to do. Though my mother seemed poised for tears, I was not backing down. This wasn't about politeness anymore. After a few lengthy minutes, I returned to my room, leaving them to digest everything. This was about advocating for myself and refusing to allow them walk all over me. I locked my door, dropped down at my desk, and inhaled deeply. I had kicked out my own family, something I never would have dreamed I had to do. But it made sense. It felt proper. The house was dead quiet for the remainder of the evening. I was not going to be taken advantage of anymore. Nobody tried to dispute me. Nobody came to my door. They all knew, I suppose, that I was no longer playing about. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. If they didn't respect me, they didn't deserve to be here. The next morning, following all the turmoil, I woke up and just lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling. Today, I knew, was the day. Lisa and Tom had 24 hours. Suddenly that deadline was running away. Strange still, though, I was not even enraged anymore. I had previously approved of what had to happen. Now it was more about execution. As soon as I got up and walked into the kitchen, I felt the home changed. Not tense exactly, but more serene, like before something significant occurs. I assumed I would cook myself some breakfast because nobody was in the kitchen. From the last grocery raid Lisa and Tom had, the refrigerator was still somewhat empty, but I made do with what was left. As I sat there eating, I began to consider how quickly this entire matter had gone out of hand. Really, things were good not so long ago. My parents and I were getting along. I was working, paying the mortgage, covering the groceries, and life was just kind of flowing naturally. Then Lisa and Tom woke up, and everything went off course. A couple hours later, I heard someone coming down the hall. It's amazing how quickly things can change when people start feeling entitled to goods they didn't earn. That was Dad. Quietly walking in, he picked up a cup of coffee and settled down across from me at the table. At first he said nothing, simply sipped and stared out the window. At last he said, "Lisa and Tom are going today." I didn't answer right away. They had opted to depart on their own, hence I wasn't sure if he was reminding me of the deadline or if he was notifying me. In either case, I nodded and started eating. He said, "They don't have anywhere to go," his voice low. I paused mid-bite and stared at him. They're going to stay at a motel for a while until they figure things out. Though the larger portion of me understood this was what had to happen, part of me felt awful. I gave them time. I had been too kind for too long, and if I didn't set boundaries now, they would just keep grabbing advantage. I kept my voice calm. He didn't argue. He didn't try to guilt-trip me, which was unexpected. He didn't want it to come to this, but left me little choice. He nodded simply and continued to sip his coffee. He probably realized at last that I would not be backing down this time. There was no going back to how things were after all that had transpired. Lisa and Tom started packing around midday. Not eager to start another fight or hear any more passive-aggressive remarks, I kept in my room for much of it. Sure enough, not long after Tom knocked on my door. After a while, I could hear his voice getting louder from down the hall. It was clear that something was about to go down. "You're really going to let this happen?" he questioned, his voice shrill as I opened it, and he stood there with the same angry face he had had since I sent him the eviction notice. "You're just going to kick us out like this?" I crossed my arms, leaning against the door frame. "I gave you 24 hours. I told you what needed to happen." He shook his head, teeth clenched. "We're family, man. You don't do this to family." I inhaled deeply, attempting to cool off. "Family doesn't take advantage of each other. I'm not just kicking you out for no reason. You've been freeloading here for weeks without contributing anything. I've been paying the mortgage, the groceries, everything, and instead of being grateful, you tried to take my room and push me out of my own house." "I'm not going to let that happen," Tom said in a few seconds. Though there was nothing left for him to argue from, I could see he was furious. Though he didn't want to own it, he knew I was correct. "So that's it, huh?" he said at last. "You're just throwing us out?" I said, responding with the identical choice I mentioned yesterday. Tom stared at me, then turned and left without further word. "You can find a way to live somewhere else, or you can stay in the guest room and actually respect me and my space. If you can't do that, then yeah, you're leaving." I let out a long breath and closed the door. Though I knew it had to be done, it was draining. Lisa and Tom were gone by mid-afternoon, though honestly I didn't want to see them go. I was not looking for anything like a heartfelt farewell or anything. The house felt different when they left. They packed, loaded their car, and drove off without saying anything to me, quieter, less pressured. That day my parents gave me little direction. They were still absorbing all that had transpired, in my opinion. Though she said nothing about it, my mother seemed unhappy. Perhaps she came to see at last that I wasn't the one starting all this. That evening, my mom knocked on my door. Lisa and Tom had pushed me too far. She entered, settled on the edge of my bed, and simply gazed at the floor for some time. She murmured gently, "They're gone," and I nodded, not saying anything. "I never thought it would reach to this point," she continued. I looked at her and realized how much pressure we were putting on you. I felt some of the irritation slightly release. "It's not that I didn't want to help," I said, "but you guys treated me like I didn't matter, like my needs and my space weren't important." She groaned and nodded. We sat in quiet for a few minutes. "You're right. We should have seen it sooner." I broke the stillness and said, "I don't want you and Dad to leave." She seemed agitated, but at least now she was beginning to grasp where I was coming from. "But if things don't change, I can't live like this." She nodded once more, standing slowly. "We'll sort it out," she said. "Things will be different, I promise." I felt a weird mix of relief and weariness as she exited the room. Though Lisa and Tom's predicament was resolved, my parents still had work to do, though I knew it would not be simple. At least now it felt like they were eager to listen. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could at last breathe. The house was silent, and the tension that had been hovering about vanished. Though at least now I had my space back, it was hardly a perfect fix. Most significantly, though, I had respect. Looking back, I see that occasionally you must make difficult decisions to safeguard yourself, even if they involve defying family expectations. It's about establishing limits and demanding the respect you so well deserve, not about selfishness. As I sat there in my room, finally alone and at peace, I couldn't help but feel proud. I have no idea what the future holds for my relationship with Lisa and Tom, or even with my parents, but I know one thing. I won't let anyone take advantage of me again, family or otherwise. I had stood up for myself, spoken my truth, and reclaimed control of my life. Though it wasn't beautiful and it wasn't easy, it was very vital. And as I slipped off to sleep that evening, I knew that whatever obstacles tomorrow would present, I was ready to meet them head-on, with a fresh strength and self-respect that nobody else could take away from me.